have the pleasure of speaking with Patty Wagstaff. If you don't know that name, I'll give you a little bit of background, but I'm guessing you already do know that name. My name is Dan Johnson, and I'm very involved with the light sports segment, as Jana mentioned, and we're going to talk about that just a little bit. But first, three-time national champion, I believe I have that right, and I can't guess the number of airplanes, but maybe you'll help me. So we're going to just do some simple questions and answers. So welcome, Patty.
Thank you.
It's great to have you here. Tell us a little bit about how you got started in aviation. That's what Rachel asked you. She said, what age were you when you started flying? So why don't you help me out here?
Okay. Yeah, she did. That was her question. How old were you when you first started? And I said I was a little bit older than her, and my dad would let me sit on his lap in the DC-6. And then as I got older, I used to go on trips with him. We lived in Japan, and he flew for Japan Airlines, and he'd let me go on trips with him and fly the DC-6 and 7. And he'd let me actually fly it too. He'd get out of the seat, and the Japanese co-pilot would just smile, because they love kids over there, and they just thought it was great, and they'd say, okay, there's Mount Fuji now, you can go do a big circle around Mount Fuji, and they let me fly it. So I think when I got older and I went to get my license, I had a lot of confidence that I could do it, because I knew it wasn't very hard.
Now I got to ask you, was the DC-6 full of passengers at the time?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, hello, you're along for the ride with the National Aerobatic Champion. She's 9 years old or something, and oh, I guess we won't do loops just yet, but you learn about that stuff later. Anyway, that's a pretty interesting start. And so thank you, Rachel, for asking a great question. Good job. And you got a signature, didn't you? Or I should say an autograph. Signature would be on your loan documents.
Yeah, right.
Autograph is what you put on your picture. Anyway, we have a couple other questions, a little bit of background, and then I'm going to stray into sort of new ground for Patty, which is involving light sport aircraft, but we won't get to that right away. One of the questions that a lot of people ask is, you know, aerobatics are great to watch in the sky, they're very exciting, and sometimes there's cameras inside the airplane looking back at you. I think I've seen you in some of those, and it looks like it's kind of a lot of work in many ways. Tell us a little bit about the physical side of being an aerobatic pilot. How tough it is inside the airplane, especially like an Extra 300, which looks like it's got a lot of hoop to it, and how you condition yourself for that.
Okay, that's a really good question. I'm kind of in a conditioning program right now. I took some time off this summer to do some other flying that I do, and I came back and started flying. And when you lose your the big thing about aerobatics, when you're doing, you know, if you just go up and do a loop and a roll, it's fine. But when you're doing really hardcore aerobatics like we do in air shows, and especially in these, you know, little monoplanes or biplanes, it takes a lot out of you physically, and you really have to build up your G tolerance, and it's really important, especially for negative Gs, because all the blood rushes up to your head, and then goes down to your feet, then goes up to your head, and the negative Gs really make you feel weird and cranky when you first start doing them. So if I lay off more than a month or 2 months, probably about a month, actually a week, you feel it, but if you really lay off for about a month, it takes about 2 months to get it back completely to where it just feels really good. And so I'm sort of in the middle of that process now. I'm just getting to the point where it's pretty good. But and people ask, is there anything you can do on the ground to condition yourself for negative Gs? And there's really not. You just have to be in the plane. You just have to fly every day, and sometimes more than once a day. So so that's what I'm doing. And it, you know, it's a whole lifestyle. It's not a hobby when you are an airshow pilot, or a competition pilot. It's a profession. And I have this little sign on my plane that says, "Don't try this at home. I'm a professional." And you know, and it's serious. And I live in a place where we have an aerobatic box, so I can fly down to surface level, because I can't come out here and do a show low enough for you to see it if I can't practice at those altitudes. I take it really, really seriously. And so I chose to live in St. Augustine because we do have an aerobatic box there, and that's why people say, why did you move to St. Augustine? I go, well, it's beautiful, it's on the beach, and the weather's great, but the most important thing is it has an aerobatic box, and that's part of, for me, that's part of being a professional, that I can practice like I want to fly. So that's kind of what it takes.
I just found out earlier when Patty and I chatted a bit about what we were going to talk about today that we're neighbors of a fashion anyway. I live at the Spruce Creek Fly-In near Daytona Beach, just kind of down the beach a little bit from St. Augustine. But, I think that's probably the first time I ever heard anybody say that in their research of where they might want to live or what locale was appealing to them, that an aerobatic box was what directed you to that locale. I'll bet you nobody else out here has done that. I certainly haven't. I chose to go to an airport, but I didn't even ask about an aerobatic box. I feel like I got to go back and check further now to see if there is one nearby. Maybe you'll come down and perform for us. Who knows?
You don't have one. The closest one's probably, well, there might be one at Keystone, I think Keystone and then St. Augustine.
Well, how do they decide where those are?
Well, somebody has to apply for them. You have to go through the FAA. It's quite a process. But we've had a box at St. Augustine since, I don't know, I guess the 70s, I think, before I was there. But it's been a center for aerobatics for a long, long time.
Well, I have to clarify there. You mean going to the FAA, it takes time? It's difficult? Can't hardly believe that.
They're pretty supportive of the boxes. I mean, there aren't that many of them, but they're pretty supportive of them because they know that that's what it takes for us to be safe. And, they're supposed to be all about safety, and they are, so so they are supportive.
Well, very reasonable, but one other aspect of that too, they know that when you folks go out and do your bit at air shows, it attracts attention, it gets people alerted to aviation and its appeal, and hopefully brings more people into the game.
Yeah.
And so FAA's mission is no longer, as it was for a while, to encourage the growth of aviation. Safety is their primary focus, but certainly if you can't go trained and you can't do as well, and that means that people may not be as excited as they could be. So, good job. But you said you can't do anything on the ground to condition for that. Now we read about, for example, astronauts, and if they're going to go into space and go to experience long periods of zero G, they can go in pools and sort of fake being in zero G.
Yeah, they have.
How do you do this with aerobatic flying? There must be something you can do on the ground.
No, there's not anything you can do to really physically condition yourself. Astronauts have they call it the Vomit Comet, is it the 707, something that, they go up and they do a big trajectory so people can experience weightlessness. But there's nothing they can do to condition themselves for zero G for, 4 or 5 days or whatever they're up there, say in the shuttle. And it's a big concern for astronauts. I gave a talk at Johnson Space Center once, and their big concern was negative G's and zero G's. And they are definitely influenced and affected by it, but there's nothing, they say an inversion table, where you hang upside down, but it doesn't simulate the same thing. So again, it's just being up there. But
Runs all the blood to your head, I guess, but that wouldn't totally simulate the effect. And yeah, the Vomit Comet, I'm not sure what it is, a 720 maybe or something like that. At any rate, they go on that Parabolic Arc. I'm sure everybody here has seen that or whatnot. And they get some pretty interesting people up there. Stephen Hawking, who's confined to a wheelchair, got to float around in space, sort of. It's a pretty exciting thing for anybody, but certainly for someone who's so confined like he is. But that's zero G. That's not multiple G, and that's not negative G. That's just zero G. So it's a totally different experience for you. And really, the only way to do it is just get up and keep flying.
Yeah. In some ways, there are a lot of similarities with zero G and negative G, and some of the effects that it has, as it turns out. So, but yeah. So
either way, it's upsetting, and you don't seem like the cranky type to me, but it makes you cranky, huh? You get too much negative?
Just when you're not used to it as part of the conditioning process, you just feel kind of, it makes you tired and a little cranky and stuff. So yeah, it's but once you get conditioned for it, it feels really good, and it's not a big deal.
So most of us that fly around in an airplane, if you've had any training at all, you know that a 60-degree bank produces a 2G maneuver, which feels pretty darn heavy, actually. Whatever you weigh double, and that's significant, just lifting your hand and minor things. Well, those aren't the numbers that you're experiencing. Tell us some numerical values about this plus and minus that your body is able to go through, and what's that like? I mean, you've got your hand on a stick, but does it have to be, strapped to the stick, or is there any other physical things you have to do to make sure that you don't lose it while you're doing all this?
No, of course, first of all, my airplane's specially built for this. There's several aerobatic airplanes that are really, top of the line composite airplanes. There's the extra that I fly, Sukhois, Caps, the French plane, and a few others. I have a 5-point harness with 2 attach points. So if I have a double lap belt, so if one of them is to break when I'm upside down, then the other one will still hold you. And I've had that happen. And those attach points are big. They're not just little, dinky seat belts. They're big, heavy attach points. We use hooker harnesses made by a guy named Jack Hooker, and he does stuff for race cars and people like that too. So we have double seat belt, a crotch strap, which is also really important, and then shoulder harnesses. And the shoulder harnesses we keep loose. You don't want them too tight, and because you don't want compression on your back when you're upside down. And also, in the event of an accident, you don't want the seat belts right behind your back, coming from below your back, because they can pull your back down and compress it. So, so we have our seat belts that go up to tubing behind us, so that it's keeping you back in the seat, but not pushing you down. No straps in your hands or anything like that. You know what's coming when you're flying, so you're in control of it. I do have straps for my feet. For negative G's, that's kind of important because they can, they do, of course, want to float off the rudder pedals, and, there's tubing on the side, and you don't want them to get stuck. Everything's open, there's no, bulkheads or anything like that, so, and I've had that happen, it's scary. So I have pretty good size foot, things. Anyway, where my feet go. And
Highly technical language there,
yeah,
foot things, yeah.
those foot things. And yeah, so that's basically it. And the seat belts are really tight. I have ratchets on either side. I have a ratchet on both sides so that I can get myself even, and I click myself in. After you go up and you pull a few G's, you do, a loop or pulling maneuver or hammerhead or something, and you kind of compress the seat a little bit. All you have to do is click the seat belts and go, but click a couple of times and you get really, really tight. So you're really tight in there. You don't want to be moving around. You have to be part of the plane, and you have to feel like you're part of the plane when you're doing this. And it's a really cool feeling when you feel that.
I'm a little surprised by the part about the shoulder belts not being snug, although you make a good point that anything that's going to compress your back, I've had some personal experience with that, and it's not very comfortable. But I'm a little surprised that you keep them loose while you fly.
Loose enough so that they don't, compress you, but not so loose that they're going to fall off your shoulders.
Now they're not ratcheted as the lap belt is, right? They're just in the conventional sort of tightening.
Yeah, it's just the lap belt that's really holding you in the plane, and a double one at that. So again, it's really important that you have two attached points so that if one breaks, both the belts don't come off.
I did fly in an airplane once that had dual lap belts on it, and it's surprising the extra security that gave me. So next time they tell you in the airplane, low and tight, well, maybe a little tighter wouldn't be a bad idea, just in case you do some aerobatics with Patty at the helm up there, doing loops in a 747 or something.
Well, I'd make sure first, and I'd empty your pockets. You can't go fly with me with anything in your pockets, because it can come out and get in the controls.
So that makes me ask you right now, you're wearing earrings right today. Do you wear earrings while you do that stuff?
Yeah, but I have a headset on, so they don't go anywhere.
Oh, okay, well, I'm sure there's a lot of little things that you take care of, though.
Sometimes I lose them, and I have to look in the tail, but I found a lot of earrings back there.
That's where everything goes, it ends up in the tail, huh? Yeah. Well, I guess you must do a lot of upward stuff then. So, in all the aerobatics that you've done, for how long have you been doing this now?
About 25 years. 25
years. Have you ever put a number of hours when you're not in normal flight?
No, I haven't. I mean, I keep a logbook. I keep logbooks and I keep it tallied up, but I haven't figured out how many aerobatic hours. So
you don't have a special aerobatic book that says upside down hours along with all?
I do note if it's acro or air show, though. I do write that in there. But I fly a lot of cross country too, so.
So what would you guess? How many hours have you been upside down in the air, or some way other than the rest of us fly? What would you just guess?
I don't know. I've probably flown, 400 or 500 air shows, and well, that's more than because those are weekends. I don't know.
Well, and then you're practicing too. That's just the performance.
Maybe 1,000 hours upside down.
So think about that. When I was a young pilot and aspiring to acquire some more time, I always heard the phrase that a high-time pilot was somebody with 1,000 hours or more. Here's 1,000 hours of being, well, some way other than the way the rest of us are, or the way we all are right now. That's a pretty amazing number.
Yeah, that's probably pretty accurate. Yeah, it's funny, huh?
Yeah, I find it.
I like it. I like flying upside down better than right side up. You can see better. It's fun. It's not, it's good for you.
Well, you could just get a high-wing airplane instead of it, but that'd be too mundane, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Ever done a cross country upside down?
Sure.
I didn't expect that. I thought you'd say, of course not, that's stupid. But
No.
it proves there are no stupid questions, I guess.
No, I mean, really, the inverted system in the airplane is designed to, you can fly for about 3 minutes upside down. So, you know, I'm not upside down that long. And usually in a cross country, I've got charts or, you know, stuff in there. So that would all flop in my face. So I can't really do that. But sometimes I'll just do a roll, you know, and that keeps it positive G, just because I get bored.
The rest of us drink a cup of coffee, she does a roll. That's how it works, I guess. So I was talking with these young fellows that flew, I don't know if you saw that last night or this morning, I think they did it again. Some of the folks from the Sun and Fun campus where they had that Central Florida Aviation Academy, I think is what it is, CFAA. 3 young fellows and one old guy like me that helps lead them around, but 3 young guys, 17, 18 years old like that, doing some pretty nice formation work. They came by last night and they said, well, here's the music we're going to use, and how do you think that works? And so we were listening to it. If you just sit there listening to music, and they were going, okay, now we're doing this, now we're doing that. They had it all down. They won't hear the music, they just know their routine, and they made the music fit the routine. But they said it was 8 minutes, and it made me think, I got to ask Patty, we all watch your routines and the other ones from the rest of your air show performers, and you know, I don't know if they seem longer to us than they seem to you, but what is the length of a typical routine, and what's the range of that?
Usually they're between 10 and 15 minutes or so. Mine's about 12 minutes, 12 to 13. Anything longer than 15 is, you know, you just start repeating yourself. You can only do so much, and you're just, you know, you're really, you know, doing a lot in that short period of time. But so generally 10-ish, 10 to 12 is about what people consider about, you know, what you can hold the attention of the crowd with. Unless it's a formation team where they have a lot of rejoins and things like that, then their routines are generally longer, or a dual routine. I do this thing called tin sticks with Skip Stewart, and we have pyro, and we race the jet truck and do all this stuff. That's a little bit longer just because there's so much to fit in. So, but you know, you want to leave people wanting a little bit more instead of being, you know, ready for it to be over.
I don't think I've never heard anyone say, ho hum, I'm not going to watch this anymore, so you must have that figured out. But it's performance stuff. It's you're like Hollywood in the air, kind of. This is all choreographed and planned and repeated and practiced.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's not, you just don't go up there and, you know, wing it, so to speak. It's, no, it's, you know, again, something you practice, and, you know, you give the announcer your routine ahead of time, and, you know, they have to announce what you're doing, so it's, you know.
Now, I've seen some of that, the preparation for it, and it kind of looks like a form of hieroglyphics to me, this strange little markings on a piece of paper that say what's going to come next. I assume you have one of those, or maybe you've got it just in your mind, but...
No, I have one.
I have one on my, it's called a sequence holder, and you put your sequence up there, and it's called Arresti symbols, and they're little symbols they're very simple. Like a straight line is you're flying right side up. If it's dash, then you're upside down. If it's like that, it's a loop, and it's a really beautiful little language, and I like writing it out, writing the cards out, and it was designed by a man in, I think, the 50s, and his name is Count Arresti, and he was a Spanish aerobatic pilot.
And that's where I always wondered about where that name came from. I've heard the Arresti, and I never knew that. So we're all learning a lot here. We're going to get to some questions from the rest of you, but now I've got to go down kind of a new path with Patty, because as we said at the outset, my focus and interest in aviation it's very broad. I like anything that flies, basically, but my knowledge area is that of light sport aircraft, and we're here at a light sport aircraft show. So one of the interesting things that's come up is that Patty's starting to cast an eye toward a light sport, and we've talked about some ones that might work for her. If you're comfortable, tell us a little bit about where that might go if you can find the right equipment, and what you might do with that knowledge once you had it.
Well, one of the things that we explored before the show this year was demoing a couple of the light sport planes, and I think there's about 3 of them out there that are aerobatic, that are advertised as aerobatic planes. So I talked to them. They weren't ready to be demoed. The certification processes are still going through. I know it's just a brand new industry, but maybe in the future. And so if any of you out there are manufacturers that have an aerobatic light sport, I mean, they're great little airplanes. And you know, a couple of people, and I told a couple of people about it, they said, well, light sport, are they really, you know? I said, oh yeah, I mean, these are strong airplanes. They're made of composites, some of them. They're good airplanes. I wouldn't have I wouldn't hesitate for a minute to fly any of them. So, any of the ones that I've seen anyway. And I don't necessarily feel that way about ultralights at all, but the LSA market's a totally different ball game. So I'm hoping that in the future I can, come back and fly an LSA in the show, or 2 or 3.
Well, we hope so too, and we hope you'll get a chance to get up in some and just experience them a little bit. For those of you that might care about what kind of aircraft that could be that would attract Patty's interest, there's one right at the entrance to the grounds here. Right when you first came in, a bright orange airplane with the engine cowling off, and it's a biplane, and it's a German design built in Poland in the way that they do in the light sport world. It can be done in different places. It's called the MK12 Comet, and I've flown it, and I'm not an aerobatic pilot, anything to compare with Patty, but we did the things that you were allowed to do with that aircraft and the engine it had in it at its time, which is the Rotax power plant, which does not allow aerobatics. And that's up to the airframe manufacturer and the engine manufacturer. If they say, in the light sport world, if they say you can't do that, then that's the end of the story. It's not even up to FAA, it's up to the manufacturers of that equipment, how they want it used. But on that Comet that we talked about, there's a Lycoming AEIO, it sounds like you're doing that little childhood rhythm there, AEIO 233, that's the 233 that many of us know from the Lycoming world, taken some weight out of it, done some other things, and that is a fully aerobatic engine. They have approved it for aerobatics up to 6G, which maybe is within your range. The airframe is good to 9G, so that's one to go look at out there. And one that I hope Patty will get up in, but I personally would be looking forward to seeing her do that someday. So I hope you'll get a chance to go up in some while you're here.
Oh, I hope so too. I'd love to. And really, the 4Gs, you could do a great air show on almost any plane. So that's all you need.
Well, it does beg the question. What's the highest G that you have used in a routine? What's the highest G that you've ever experienced?
Probably about 12, but normally I pull about 9 or 10. So, but the plane's built for it, and I'm used to it, and so.
Great, the plane's built for it, but I look at myself and go, 12G, oh my goodness.
Well, it's quick. It's quick in a small aerobatic plane. It's not like military Gs. And some aerobatic guys go, oh yeah, those military guys, they're only pulling 8 or 9 Gs, or 7 Gs. And I've been up in military planes, and trust me, it's very intense when you're in a high G maneuver for 20 seconds or 10 seconds. Ours are like really fast, so it's a different ballgame. But the military pilots don't do negative G. They're kind of scared of it.
Is that right? I did not know that fact.
We have it over on them with the negative G, but we go back and forth with it.
So that's why they wanted you to come and talk to them at the Air Force Base to hear about negative G, because they just don't know that much about it. I'd never heard that fact before. That
was actually Johnson Space Center, and it was the astronaut program, because they experienced some effects of the 0G for so long. So, and we experienced very similar things. So it's kind of interesting. It just, it's different.
Well, one thing we should have done that you always do as a good speaker is ask your audience. Do we have anybody, a show of hands, anybody who does aerobatics out there? Regular old aerobatics, not wild aerobatics. Okay, a handful of you, that's interesting. And I've done loops and rolls and whatnot, and that's about where it ends, and wingovers and things like that, nothing wild. But one of the maneuvers that I enjoyed seeing early on in my flying career that most impressed me, and I'd like to hear you describe how it is to do a Luncheonette.
The Luncheonette is the Czech word for headache, and it was invented, they say, by a Czech pilot, and trying to think who, was that? It wasn't Miro. Who was it again? It was, do you remember, Randy? His name's on that. Lottie Bizak? Lottie Bizak, I think his name is, yeah. And I've never met him, but I guess he invented it. And really the best planes for it are the little Pizzas with the short wings and the big prop. And those Pizzas are really unstable, and they'll really, really tumble. My extra's not that great at tumbling maneuvers, but a Luncheonette is just basically a tumble where the plane's going end over end. So it's fun. It doesn't want to stay in, it wants to come out. So you have to play with it to get it to stay in.
The Czech word for headache, well, there you go. That pretty much defines a lot.
Everybody thinks it really means hangover, but...
Well, sort of the same thing in a way, I guess. But well, speaking of that, in the little pits, there is the company that is putting the Lycoming on the MK12 Comet, which is similar in description. That might work for that. So someday maybe we'll see, maybe at this show, a Luncheonette in a FK12. But they are also planning to work on a little Pitts for the LSA space. So who knows? Could be one of those.
Yeah, I don't see why Pitts couldn't be an LSA now. I mean, they got a little S1S or S1C only weighs about 700 pounds, so they're way under, and they don't go very fast. So yeah.
Except in roll rate, they got a pretty wild roll rate. They look like.
Pretty good, yeah, pretty good roll rate. Yeah.
So, and speaking of that, on those kind of airplanes with 4 ailerons, obviously 2 on each set of wings, the roll rates get pretty high. What kind of roll rate is necessary? And let's go back to something ordinary like a Cessna 172 and the 45 to 45 roll reversal thing. You're probably looking at, I don't know, 3 seconds or so, or 4 seconds. It's not very fast. You don't want that in a 172. What are the kind of numbers that you need to have in an extra 300 or some other aerobatic aircraft so that you can do the things you need to do?
We're looking at roll rates from 360 to 400 degrees a second now, and some of them might even be a little bit faster, but it's pretty hard when you get over 400 degrees a second because it just is a blur and it's really hard to stop a plane on a heading. So 360 to 400 is really good. You can get used to that. And I think a 172 probably has a faster roll rate than 3 seconds. I mean, sorry, yeah, 360 degrees. I don't know.
Well, I don't know that anyone's ever evaluated a 172 that way, but so I just do these little, 45 to 45 degree banks, and that's the best I can approximate that. But 400 degrees a second, well, yeah, that'd be fast. That'd be no question. That'd be fast. So that brings up another thought then. There's an interesting maneuver where you roll an airplane, but you don't just continuously roll it. You stop on various azimuth or point roll. And when you're in, it's one thing to watch from the ground, and when somebody announces it, they can call off those points very accurately for you. But we're all standing on the ground where everything's nice and steady. How do you judge the fact that you're right on your roll point when you're in the air?
By looking outside.
Too simple. You don't draw little lines on the canopy or anything, I don't suppose.
Yeah, no, you don't. There's some tricks you can use in a biplane. You have some, struts out there that you can look at and things like that. No, you just get used to it. Really, a lot of it, what we do is critiqued on the ground. There's somebody on the ground that tells you, okay, that looks perfect. And you're coming at them. Is that 90 degrees? Yes. Is that 90 degrees? Yes. So a lot of it's done by having somebody on the ground critiquing you. And you have to be able to take that. To be a good aerobatic pilot, you have to be able to listen to somebody and do what they tell you, because you think you're doing it right and you can't always tell, and that's really important. And even though, I have so many years of experience doing this, I still need that. I still need somebody coaching me and critiquing me every year.
It's hard to be detached if you're doing the maneuvers yourself, I'm sure.
Well, no, it's not a matter of detachment. It's a matter of, the sight picture that you're looking for. You may be, you want it to be perfect. You don't want to be 3 degrees or 4 degrees off. You want it to look perfect every time. That's what we always are aiming for. So, but I can't tell necessarily whether I'm 3 or 4 degrees off in some of these maneuvers. It really takes somebody with a radio saying, no, you need a little more. And then once you get that perfect, angle or vertical or whatever, then you know what it's supposed to feel like or look like from inside the cockpit.
Let's talk a little bit about breaking into the game here. We see new pilots periodically at Oshkosh. They often get the Saturday or Sunday at the end of the show, and they've already shown some promise and some capability.
Wait, no, not the Saturday, Sunday. They get the Thursday.
Is that what it is? Okay. The lower volume days, and they let some younger folks perform, guys and gals both, and see if they can show their stuff. But before they even get to there must be a kind of an approval process that says, no, we don't want you doing it. You're a crazy person. We want somebody who's sensible about this.
Yeah.
What's the process to break into the game?
Yeah, that's really important. You can't just go fly. You can go fly. Anybody can go fly aerobatics, in an approved plane, in an approved area, which is 1,500 feet above the surface, not in a congested airspace, not on an airway. Anybody can do that. You can go out and practice, or you can go to a practice aerobatic box. Anybody can. And use that in an approved airplane and fly a lot lower than 1,500 feet. But you can't do it in front of an open air gathering of people. That's the big key. We don't want people on the ground getting hurt. So in order to fly in front of an open air gathering of people at an air show, you have to have a special waiver, and it's called a statement of aerobatic competency. And so every time I go to an air show, the FAA, and that happened to me today, they look and see that mine's current. And it has to be, we have to be evaluated every single year. And it's a stepping down process. So your first waiver will be maybe 800 feet above the surface. I think my first waiver was like 1,500 feet. And then at 800 feet, and then 500 feet, and then 250 feet, and then unlimited, where you can go as low as you want. And you have to have flown X number of shows, I forget how many, at different sites in order to qualify to get lower and lower. And some people never get to zero level. They don't want to. They're flying a warbird, or they'll never do enough shows. I have a friend who lives in Hawaii, and he can never do, he flies like one show a year. Even though he's quite capable, he can never, he doesn't want to leave Hawaii. I don't blame him. So he'll never get down to surface level. So that's how it works.
So the fellows that I was referring to that are doing it in, let's call it the off periods at Oshkosh or another show that are breaking in, their routines always are a little bit higher because they haven't gotten that lower level of approval yet.
Yeah, for the people that are breaking in, they will be flying higher, for sure. But they will have a card, and they will have approval to do it, for sure.
Does FAA, do they observe all of this, or do they fly with you to give approvals for these things?
We have a program through our airshow organization called ICAS. It's the International Council of Air Shows, and it's called the ACE program, Aerobatic Competency Evaluation. And we have a program, and so if, say, somebody here wants to fly air shows, you'd go onto the site, you'd look it up, you'd pick somebody in your area that's an ACE, like a desert, you might call me or somebody else in this area and say, I want to be an air show pilot, will you help me? And then that person just sort of takes you under their wing and helps you with the process. So that's how it works. So it's a mentorship process as well as anything else.
So there you go. We appreciate you being here today and listening to Patty, and we hope you'll stay and watch the air show demonstration tonight. I know I'll be watching. I'm sure everyone will. But thank you so much to Patty Wagstaff for joining us here. Let's please hear a round of applause for her.
Thanks for having me. I have to go get ready to fly.
All right, back to work. So thank you all for coming today. Hope you enjoy the show.